Keep the change, the towering alien gangster said with a grin as he slid an empty credit chip across the counter. Humans should be grateful we even walked in. The cafe fell silent. Every customer heard it. No one looked up. No one wanted to be noticed. Emily Carter simply smiled the same warm smile she gave every customer and replied, "Your caramel latte will be ready in just a second." North Star Coffee was the smallest shop on Orion Nexus Station, tucked into a narrow corner between a freight elevator and an aging transit tunnel where merchants, smugglers, diplomats, and miners crossed paths every hour of every day. The espresso machine hissed. Fresh coffee filled the air. Outside the front window, neon signs reflected off polished steel walkways while cargo shuttles drifted across the station's artificial skyline. To most people, it was just another neighborhood cafe. To everyone who lived there, it was the only place that still felt a little like home. Emily had worked behind the counter for almost 4 years. She was 28, born in Portland, Oregon, with blonde hair usually tied into a loose ponytail and blue eyes that always seemed calmer than everyone else's. Every morning, she unlocked the doors at 6 sharp. Every evening, she locked them at exactly 9. She never missed a day. She never argued with rude customers. She never raised her voice. Even the regulars joked that she had somehow turned patience into a superpower. "Large mocha for Mr. Daniels," she called with a cheerful smile. An older man wearing grease-stained mechanic coveralls accepted the cup. "You're too nice for this station, Emily." She laughed softly. "Coffee's easier than fixing engines." Before he could answer, the front door slid open again. 5 enormous figures stepped inside wearing expensive dark coats, trimmed with metallic thread. Every conversation stopped. Every chair suddenly felt too loud. Nobody needed introductions. The black serpent emblems stitched onto their collars said enough. Orion Black Syndicate, the most feared criminal organization in 3 sectors. Their leader, Darius Voss, walked straight to the counter without looking at the menu. Nearly 7 feet tall, broad-shouldered, with smooth gray skin and golden eyes that never seemed to blink. He carried himself like every room already belonged to him. 2 bodyguards positioned themselves near the entrance while the others slowly examined the customers as if deciding who deserved to stay. Darius rested one hand on the counter. "Human," he said casually. "Make me something worth drinking." Emily nodded. "Any preferences?" "Surprise me." "You got it." She reached for freshly roasted beans, measured them carefully, and began grinding them with practiced hands. The room remained painfully quiet except for the steady rhythm of the grinder and the soft steam escaping the espresso machine. Darius watched her without saying another word. One of his men smirked. "Amazing how humans celebrate pouring hot water." A few nervous laughs escaped from another table before disappearing just as quickly. Emily ignored the comment completely. She finished the drink, added a small swirl of foam art shaped like a star, placed the cup gently in front of Darius, and smiled. "I hope you enjoy it." He lifted the cup, took one sip, then another. For the first time since entering, his expression softened ever so slightly. "Not bad," he admitted before placing the empty cup back onto the counter. Then he turned toward the exit. Emily glanced at the untouched payment terminal. "Sir," she called politely. Darius stopped without turning around. "Your total comes to 12 credits. He chuckled. No, the word echoed through the cafe with unsettling ease. "And you should feel honored I gave your little shop my business." Without another glance, he walked toward the door as his crew followed behind him, leaving the empty cup sitting alone on the polished counter. Every customer stared at Emily, waiting to see whether she would protest. She didn't. She simply picked up the cup, wiped the counter clean, printed a receipt, folded it neatly, and slipped it into a plain white envelope before writing one line across the front in careful handwriting. "Outstanding balance." The Kaffa copyright slowly came back to life after the Syndicate disappeared into the crowded station corridor, but nobody spoke above a whisper. Mr. Daniels stared at the door for several long seconds before looking back at Emily. "You really are not going after your money?" he asked quietly. Emily slid the folded receipt into the plain white envelope and placed it inside a weathered wooden drawer beneath the register. "People usually come back eventually," she answered with the same relaxed smile. Mr. Daniels frowned. "Those people never do." Emily simply shrugged. "Then I will keep the receipt ready." The old mechanic wanted to say something else, but instead he picked up his coffee and left with an uneasy shake of his head. By lunchtime, word had already spread across Orion Nexus. The Syndicate boss had walked out without paying, and somehow the human barista had remained perfectly calm. Some thought she was brave. Most assumed she was simply naive. Throughout the afternoon, regular customers quietly stopped by for coffee, each offering a different warning. A cargo pilot leaned across the counter and whispered, "Forget the credits. Consider it the cost of staying alive." A freight dispatcher slipped a generous tip into the jar and said, "Take a vacation. Maybe Earth. Stay gone for a while." Even Sheriff Lyra Soren walked past the front window twice before finally stepping inside. The tall blue-skinned officer removed her cap and ordered black coffee. She looked exhausted. "Emily," she said carefully, keeping her voice low enough that only the two of them could hear. "I heard what happened this morning." Emily handed her the cup. "News travels fast around here." Lyra sighed. "Faster when it involves Darius Voss." She glanced toward the security cameras mounted in opposite corners of the Kafka copyright. "You should erase today's footage." Emily tilted her head slightly. "Why would I do that?" "Because nobody wins against him." Emily stirred a fresh pitcher of milk before answering. "Maybe winning is not always the point." Lyra studied her for a moment, searching for fear. She found none. That bothered her more than panic would have. "Just be careful," she finally said before leaving the Kafka copyright with her untouched coffee still warming her hands. Evening settled over Orion Nexus. Outside, thousands of lights illuminated the station's endless network of bridges and platforms, while freight vessels drifted silently beyond the massive observation windows. Inside North Star Coffee, Emily cleaned tables, counted inventory, and wiped down the espresso machine exactly as she did every night. At 8:58, the last customer waved goodbye. At exactly 9 o'clock, she locked the front door. The station became strangely quiet after closing. Emily turned off the music, switched the sign to closed, and carried the day's receipts into the tiny office behind the counter. She unlocked the old wooden drawer, removed the white envelope marked outstanding balance, and placed it inside a heavy steel lockbox that looked decades older than the Kafka copyright itself. The box already held dozens of nearly identical envelopes. Some were faded with age. Others looked brand new. She closed the lid, turned a brass key, then glanced at the wall clock. 9:15. Right on schedule. She slipped on a light jacket, picked up the steel box with both hands, and exited through the employee entrance into the cool night air. Across the street, hidden inside the shadow of an abandoned maintenance tunnel, someone quietly lowered a pair of binoculars. A calm voice spoke into a concealed communicator. "She has it again. Same route. Same time. Notify Mr. Voss. We need to know what is inside that box before sunrise." Emily drove without music. The old pickup hummed steadily through the nearly empty service lanes of Orion Nexus, while the steel lockbox rested on the passenger seat, secured by the seat belt as if it were another traveler. Behind her, two dark transports stayed exactly 4 car lengths back. They never gained ground. They never fell behind. Emily noticed them after the second turn. She did not check the mirror again. Instead, she smiled faintly and whispered, "Right on time." 20 minutes later, she pulled into an aging warehouse district near Dock 17, a forgotten corner of the station where abandoned shipping containers stood stacked like silent monuments from another era. Most businesses had moved years ago. Only automated maintenance drones still wandered the dim corridors. Emily parked beside a weathered brick building with faded letters that simply read North Star Storage. She stepped out carrying the steel lockbox with both hands and walked toward a plain metal door. The transports remained hidden at the far end of the street. Inside one vehicle, Victor Hale lowered a surveillance scanner. "She comes here every night," he muttered. "Either she is hiding money or something worth much more." Another operative frowned. "Boss said not to scare her." Victor smiled. "Watching is not scaring." Emily unlocked the building and disappeared inside. The lights came on one section at a time, revealing dusty shelves, old furniture, broken coffee equipment, and dozens of sealed cardboard boxes. It looked exactly like an ordinary storage facility that had been forgotten years ago. She walked all the way to the back wall where an old vending machine stood unplugged. Setting the lockbox on the floor, she pressed 3 buttons on the dead machine. The heavy concrete wall beside it released with a soft mechanical click and quietly slid open. A narrow hallway appeared beyond it. Bright white lights illuminated a room that looked nothing like the warehouse outside. Modern computer terminals lined both walls. Massive digital displays covered one side of the room, showing financial transfers, shipping routes, legal filings, customs records, and thousands of names scrolling across multiple screens. Emily placed the steel box on a stainless steel table. She opened it carefully. Inside were not stacks of credits, but white envelopes identical to the one she had added earlier that evening. Every envelope carried a handwritten name. Every one represented someone who believed they had taken something without consequence. She picked up the newest envelope. Outstanding balance. Darius Voss. 12 credits. She scanned the receipt into the system. Immediately, dozens of connected files appeared across the monitors. Freight companies, shell corporations, luxury properties, cargo registrations, offshore banking networks, smuggling routes disguised as humanitarian shipments. Emily quietly read each update while making handwritten notes in a leather notebook that looked far older than the computers surrounding her. She never rushed. Every detail mattered. Suddenly, one monitor flashed yellow. Unauthorized signal detected. Emily looked toward the alert, but showed no panic. "You found the building," she said softly to herself. "Not the room." Outside, Victor Hale studied the warehouse through high-powered optics. "Thermal scan?" he asked. One operative shook his head. "Nothing unusual. One heat signature. No security team." Victor narrowed his eyes. Nobody carries a heavy lockbox to an empty warehouse every night. He reached for his communicator. "Call Mr. Voss. Tell him I want permission to enter." A few seconds later, the reply came back. "Approved. Bring me whatever she is hiding." Victor smiled, opened the transport door, and together with 4 men began walking toward the warehouse entrance, completely unaware that Emily had already watched every step of their approach on cameras they had never managed to find. Victor Hale raised one hand, and the 5 Syndicate operatives spread out across the empty warehouse with practiced precision. Flashlights swept across dusty shelves and abandoned machinery, while portable scanners searched for hidden compartments. "She is here somewhere," Victor said calmly. "Find the lockbox. Do not damage anything unless you have to." The warehouse remained completely still. No footsteps, no voices. Only the distant hum of station ventilation echoed through the building. One operative pushed open an old storage cabinet. Empty. Another examined broken espresso machines stacked against the wall. Nothing. A third pointed toward the unplugged vending machine. "This does not belong with the rest of the junk." Victor walked over and examined it. He pressed random buttons. Nothing happened. He pulled on the handle. It did not move. "Bring the portable power cell." Before anyone could respond, a pleasant female voice echoed through hidden speakers. "The building is closed. Please come back during business hours." Every operative froze. Victor slowly looked around the warehouse. "Emily," he called out, "I only want a conversation." Her voice answered with the same calm tone she used behind the coffee counter. Most conversations begin with knocking on the front door. Victor smiled. "You have something that belongs to my employer." "No," she replied. "I have records of things that belong to many people." One operative finally connected the portable battery to the vending machine. The display flickered to life. Before he could press another button, metal security shutters dropped over every window with a loud mechanical crash. Emergency lights switched on, bathing the warehouse in soft amber light instead of darkness. "Doors just locked," another operative warned while checking the main entrance. Victor remained surprisingly composed. "She is trying to scare us." Emily answered immediately. "Actually, I am trying to slow you down." Suddenly, several maintenance drones rolled out from hidden charging stations. They were ordinary service machines, the kind used all over Orion Nexus to clean floors and transport supplies. None carried weapons. Instead, they projected bright warning lights while broadcasting the same recorded message. "Restricted maintenance zone. Please remain where you are until inspection is complete." One impatient operative shoved a drone aside. The machine simply redirected itself and blocked another aisle. A second drone extended a caution barrier across the floor. Another began spraying harmless white marking foam that instantly coated boots and pant legs with bright reflective streaks. Victor frowned. "She is tagging us." At that exact moment, every camera inside the warehouse activated. Small indicator lights blinked red from every corner. Emily watched everything from the secure operations room behind the hidden wall. She quietly saved each video feed to multiple encrypted servers while updating her handwritten notebook. Unauthorized entry, she whispered as she wrote the time beside Victor's name. Voluntary evidence. A soft chime sounded from one of the computer monitors. Motion detected outside. Emily switched cameras. 2 more Syndicate transports had just arrived, along with a sleek black vehicle she recognized immediately. Darius Voss himself stepped out, adjusting his tailored coat before looking directly at the warehouse entrance. Even through the security camera, his confidence filled the screen. He believed the night was finally under his control. Emily took a slow breath, closed the notebook, and carefully locked it inside another drawer. Then she looked at the concealed control panel beside the hidden doorway and rested one finger over a single silver switch. "You should have left after the coffee," she said quietly. "Now you are all officially inside the record." The silver switch clicked beneath Emily's finger, but nothing dramatic happened. No alarms blared. No explosions shook the warehouse. Instead, the security monitors quietly changed color from amber to blue. A soft tone echoed through the hidden operations room as one message appeared across every screen. Evidence collection protocol active. Emily folded her arms and watched as Darius Voss entered through the front door with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. He glanced around the warehouse, unimpressed by the maintenance drones and locked exits. "Enough games," he said. "Come out." His voice carried through the building. Emily answered through the speaker system. "You walked into my workplace without permission." Darius smiled. "You walked into my territory 4 years ago." "No," she replied calmly. "I opened a coffee shop." Victor stepped closer to his employer and quietly said, "There is something hidden here. We just have not found it yet." Darius nodded once before addressing the room again. "Emily, I respect people who plan ahead. Let us save each other some time. Give me the lockbox, and everyone goes home." Emily looked at the monitor showing the old steel box resting safely inside the concealed room. "You are asking for the wrong thing." "Then tell me what I should be asking for." She smiled to herself before answering. "You should be asking why I wanted you to follow me." The words hung in the air. Victor's confident expression faded for the first time that night. Darius narrowed his golden eyes. "Explain." Emily pressed another key on the control panel. Every monitor inside the warehouse suddenly came alive. Not with security footage from tonight, but with hundreds of archived recordings. Different dates, different years, different locations. Syndicate members collecting illegal payments. Cargo containers changing identification numbers. Luxury yachts docking under false registrations. Corporate executives shaking hands with known smugglers. Faces, times, places. Every recording had a timestamp. Every recording carried authenticated location data. One of the operatives stared at the screens. "How long has she been watching?" Emily answered before anyone else could speak. "Long enough to stop guessing." Darius remained calm, but Victor noticed something unusual. His employer was no longer looking for hidden doors. He was studying the evidence. "Delete it," Darius said quietly. Emily shook her head, even though he could not see her. "Impossible. Everything can be deleted. Not after tonight." Victor stepped toward the nearest monitor. "Boss, these files are connected." Emily nodded. Finally, another screen lit up with an expanding network diagram. One recording linked to another, then another. Shipping companies connected to shell corporations. Shell corporations connected to financial accounts. Financial accounts connected to public officials, transport unions, insurance brokers, customs offices, and private security contractors. The web stretched farther than anyone in the warehouse expected. Even Victor whispered, "This is the whole organization." Emily spoke gently, almost like she was explaining a coffee recipe to a customer. "Every unpaid debt leaves a trail. Most people only notice the money. I follow the choices." Darius slowly turned toward one camera mounted high above the entrance. "Who are you?" For the first time all night, Emily did not answer immediately. She looked down at an old photograph resting beside her keyboard. It showed a much younger version of herself standing beside a middle-aged man in a simple suit, both smiling in front of the same coffee shop before Orion Nexus had changed forever. She picked up the picture, studied it for a moment, then placed it back on the desk. "That," she said quietly, "is the first question you have asked that actually matters." At that exact moment, another notification appeared across every monitor. External backup completed. 72 encrypted archive copies successfully verified. Emily glanced at the confirmation, smiled faintly, and realized the night had just crossed the one point from which neither she nor the Syndicate could ever turn back. Emily read the confirmation one last time before closing the archive window. 72 verified copies. The evidence no longer depended on a single room, a single computer, or a single person. She leaned back in her chair, expecting Darius to lose his temper. Instead, he smiled. It was calm, controlled, almost amused. "You planned for me to arrive," he said through the warehouse speakers. "I did," Emily answered. "You wanted witnesses. I wanted choices." Darius slowly removed his gloves and placed them neatly on a nearby workbench. "Then let me make one." He looked toward Victor Hale. "Call every regional office." Victor hesitated. "Every office. Everyone." Within seconds, secure communication devices came alive across the warehouse. Emily watched new signals appear on her monitors. At first, she assumed panic had spread through the Syndicate. Then she noticed something unexpected. Entire financial accounts were being emptied. Corporate registrations were disappearing. Cargo manifests were being erased from legal databases. Hundreds of shell companies were dissolving themselves in real time. Darius looked directly into the nearest security camera. "You collected years of evidence against an organization you believed would defend itself by hiding." He smiled again. "You still think like an investigator. I think like a businessman." Emily's fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as more alerts flashed across the screens. "They are destroying their own network," she whispered. Victor listened to report after report through his communicator. Northern routes closed. Frontier accounts liquidated. Mining subsidiaries abandoned. Medical transports redirected. Offshore vaults emptied. Even he sounded surprised. Darius nodded with quiet satisfaction. "If an empire cannot be saved, you save the people who can build the next one." Emily finally understood. She had expected denial. She had expected threats. She had never expected voluntary sacrifice. The Syndicate was cutting away entire branches to protect its core. Every erased company made future prosecutions harder. Every abandoned warehouse removed another physical trail. It was ruthless, disciplined, and frighteningly effective. Sheriff Lyra Soren suddenly appeared on one of Emily's encrypted channels. "Emily, what is happening?" "Financial regulators across 3 sectors just issued emergency alerts. Half the companies we were watching have vanished in less than 5 minutes." Emily kept watching the screens. "He is burning his own map before anyone else can read it. Can you stop him?" Emily answered honestly. "Not all of it." Darius folded his arms. "Now we are finally having an intelligent conversation." He walked slowly through the warehouse, completely ignoring the maintenance drones circling around him. "You preserve the past. I am already building tomorrow." Emily opened another secured database that had remained offline until now. Thousands of names appeared, followed by photographs, handwritten notes, interview transcripts, and shipping records that had never been connected to the financial files. Her expression changed for the first time that night. Not fear. Resolve. "You assumed I only collected evidence about money," she said quietly. Darius remained silent. "Money changes owners," Emily continued. "People remember promises." She selected a single file marked Legacy Index, but stopped before opening it. If she released those records, there would be no going back for anyone involved, including innocent families tied to old alliances. Lyra's voice returned through the headset. "Emily, whatever you are looking at, your heart rate just spiked." Emily took a slow breath. "Because I hoped I would never need it." Darius noticed the hesitation immediately. "There it is," he said softly. "Everyone has one door they do not want to open." Emily looked at the file, then at the photograph beside her keyboard. The smiling man in the picture seemed to stare back at her. Outside the hidden room, Victor received one final encrypted message. He read it once, then slowly looked toward Darius. "Boss," he said, unable to hide the surprise in his voice. "The board approved Phase 2. Darius gave the smallest nod. "Then tell Miss Carter the coffee shop is no longer the target. Starting tonight, we are going after everyone she has ever tried to protect." Emily closed her eyes for only a second. That was all she allowed herself. Fear did not disappear, but it settled into something she could control. She looked at the photograph one more time before sliding it into her jacket pocket. You finally figured it out, she said. This was never about me. Darius folded his hands behind his back. No, it is about leverage. Every person you protected becomes another door I can knock on. Emily stood and walked toward the hidden control console. Her voice remained steady. You still think this is a negotiation? Sheriff Lyra Soren spoke through the secure channel. Emily, I have patrol units standing by. Tell me where to go. Emily shook her head, even though Lyra could not see her. Not yet. Why not? Because they are counting on that. On the warehouse floor, Victor watched maintenance drones continue their slow patrol while his communicator filled with updates. Every few seconds, another report arrived confirming that former Syndicate businesses had vanished before regulators could seize them. Darius had lost billions without showing the slightest regret. It was the kind of decision only someone completely devoted to control could make. Emily opened the file marked Legacy Index. Instead of financial records, hundreds of personal profiles appeared. Families rescued from trafficking routes. Independent merchants who had testified anonymously. Freight captains who secretly carried refugees instead of illegal cargo. Retired investigators who had spent decades gathering fragments of the truth. None of them had ever met each other. None knew the full story. Emily had spent years making sure they stayed that way. Darius spoke again. You collected evidence. I collected patience. We are not so different. Emily answered without hesitation. There is one difference. You believe people are assets. I believe they are worth protecting. She pressed another command. The map on her largest monitor suddenly transformed. Instead of showing criminal networks, it displayed hundreds of safe locations scattered across multiple star systems. Lyra stared at the transmission in disbelief. Emily, these are evacuation routes. They have existed for years. You built all of this while serving coffee. Emily smiled faintly. Coffee gave people a reason to talk. At that exact moment, every encrypted phone inside the Legacy Index activated automatically. Quiet notifications appeared across dozens of worlds. No details. No panic. Only one simple message. It is time to leave. Victor noticed the sudden surge of encrypted traffic on his scanner. Boss, signals are spreading everywhere. Darius's expression remained calm, but his eyes narrowed. Track them. Victor looked down at the display again before slowly shaking his head. I cannot. They split into thousands of relays. Emily finally stepped out from behind the hidden wall and entered the warehouse for the first time that night. She wore the same apron she had used all day at the coffee shop. There were no weapons in her hands. No armor. No bodyguards. She simply stood a few yards away from Darius with complete confidence. Even the maintenance drones quietly rolled aside, as if making room for the conversation. Darius studied her carefully. You could have disappeared years ago. Yes. But you stayed. Someone had to keep the lights on. For the first time, Victor looked uncertain. He glanced between Emily and Darius, realizing neither of them had truly been reacting to the events of the night. Both had been following plans prepared years in advance. Then a soft alert echoed through the warehouse. Emily looked toward one monitor as a new message appeared across every screen. Legacy evacuation complete. Primary witnesses safe. Darius read the words without blinking, but the silence that followed lasted longer than anything either of them had said. Emily met his eyes and quietly whispered, You came here looking for my records. You never noticed I was moving the people first. The warehouse remained silent after Emily's words settled into the room. Nobody moved. Even the maintenance drones paused as if they understood that something irreversible had just happened. Darius slowly looked away from the monitor displaying Legacy evacuation complete and back toward Emily. You expected me to come after the witnesses, he said. Emily nodded. Not because you were cruel. Because you were predictable. Victor glanced down at his communicator again. Every location they had planned to visit had already gone dark. Apartments were empty. Freight schedules had changed. Registration records had been updated. Every trail ended hours earlier. Boss, Victor said quietly. They disappeared before we even approved Phase 2. Darius remained calm, but for the first time his confidence was forced rather than natural. Emily noticed it immediately. You planned for tonight, he admitted. No, she replied. I planned for the day someone finally stopped pretending a cup of coffee was all I served. Sheriff Lyra Soren listened through the encrypted channel without interrupting. She finally understood why Emily had never rushed to arrest anyone. One careless move years ago would have exposed innocent people. Patience had protected them far better than handcuffs ever could. Suddenly, another alert flashed across Emily's largest monitor. Incoming transmissions. Dozens became hundreds, then thousands. Government auditors, independent journalists, insurance investigators, banking regulators, port authorities. Every organization that had quietly received pieces of Emily's archive was beginning to compare records with one another. Separate puzzles were becoming one picture. Lyra whispered, almost to herself, "They are connecting everything." Emily smiled faintly. People usually do the right thing once they can finally see the whole story. Victor watched the expanding network map in disbelief. "We erased the companies." Emily looked at him. "You erased the names on the doors, not the people who walked through them." Darius slowly approached one of the monitors, studying the growing web of connections. "Interesting," he said. "You never intended to defeat the Syndicate." Emily answered honestly. "Organizations survive. Lies do not." One by one, notifications appeared across the screens. Port licenses suspended pending review. Financial transfers frozen for verification. Customs clearances delayed. Luxury docking privileges revoked. None of it destroyed the Syndicate overnight. Instead, it forced every hidden deal into daylight. Every shortcut suddenly required questions nobody had dared ask before. Victor looked toward Darius. "What are your orders?" Darius thought for several long seconds. Then, to everyone's surprise, he smiled. "No retreat." Victor frowned. "But every route is closing." "Exactly." Darius turned toward Emily. "You believe you changed the rules tonight. You only changed the battlefield." Emily met his gaze without hesitation. "Then we finally agree on something." Before anyone could speak again, the warehouse lights flickered. Every monitor briefly went black. When they returned a second later, the evidence files were untouched, but a single new message appeared across every screen. "Authorized access confirmed." Emily's expression changed. She had never seen those words before. Lyra's voice came through the headset immediately. "Emily, I did not send that." Victor slowly stepped back from the monitor. "Neither did we." Darius stared at the message in complete silence. Somewhere beyond the warehouse, someone else had just entered the system. Someone with credentials neither Emily nor the Syndicate recognized. A final line appeared beneath the first. Federal Human Trade Commission Special Investigations Division. Case accepted. Emily looked at the old photograph in her pocket, then back at the screen. After years of working completely alone, someone had finally answered the file she thought nobody would ever read. Emily stood perfectly still as the message remained on every screen. Federal Human Trade Commission Special Investigations Division. Case accepted. Years of silence had ended with a single line of text. Darius Voss read it twice before letting out a slow breath. "So that is why you never ran," he said. Emily looked at him calmly. "Running would have protected me. Staying protected everyone else." Outside the warehouse, the first signs of change had already begun. Cargo departures across Orion Nexus were temporarily paused, while financial verification requests flooded every major terminal. Banking networks requested additional identity confirmation. Shipping licenses entered automatic review. None of it looked dramatic from the outside, but for an organization built on invisible shortcuts, every extra question became another wall. Victor checked his communicator one last time. The reports were no longer about profits or routes. They were requests from frightened partners asking what had happened. Insurance providers had suspended coverage. Freight companies refused high-risk contracts. Independent captains quietly canceled long-standing agreements. Nobody wanted to be the last person connected to a collapsing secret. Darius slipped his gloves back on with the same measured movements he had shown all night. "You did not destroy my organization," he said. Emily smiled gently. "No. I gave honest people enough information to make their own decisions." Sheriff Lyra Soren finally arrived outside with a small team of officers. They entered carefully, expecting chaos, but instead found two people standing across from each other in complete silence. Lyra looked from Emily to Darius before asking, "Is it over?" Emily answered first. "The hiding is." Darius surprised everyone by giving a small nod. "That is an accurate description." He turned toward Victor. "We are leaving." Victor blinked. Just like that. There is nothing here to win anymore. Without another word, the Syndicate members walked toward the warehouse exit. No one tried to stop them. Emily understood something that many people never would. The real victory had never been putting handcuffs on one man. It had been making sure an entire system could never quietly pretend it was legitimate again. As the warehouse doors closed behind Darius, the morning shift began across Orion Nexus. Workers filled the transit platforms. Cafes unlocked their doors. Freight crews grabbed breakfast before another long day. Most of them had no idea history had changed during the night. A week later, North Star Coffee reopened. The broken sign had been cleaned. Fresh flowers sat beside the register. Mr. Daniels walked in just after 6 in the morning, smiled, and ordered his usual mocha. "Good to see you back," he said. Emily handed him the cup. "Good to be back." More customers followed. A miner, a teacher, 2 station mechanics. Even Sheriff Lyra stopped by before her shift. Life slowly found its rhythm again. Just before noon, the front door opened one more time. A young alien traveler ordered a simple black coffee, paid exactly 12 credits, then quietly placed another 12 credits into the tip jar. Emily noticed, but said nothing. As the customer reached the door, he turned back and smiled. "My father always said small debts never matter." Emily leaned against the counter and answered softly. "Small debts become large ones when people stop caring about them." After he left, she looked at the tip jar for a long moment before glancing toward the busy station outside. The galaxy had not changed because one human was stronger than everyone else. It changed because one ordinary person refused to believe that honesty was too small to matter. She picked up a clean cup, filled it with fresh coffee, welcomed the next customer with the same warm smile she had always worn, and for the first time in years, the receipt marked outstanding balance was no longer waiting in the drawer.